Kit Gurus with Gigabyte at Computex 2023, and I have a thing behind me. The venue is normally used for weddings and other functions. It's got a heck of an echo, and there's music and lights. So let's see how this video goes, shall we? Starting with a laptop, the Aero 16 OLED. This model is on sale already in the UK, but we haven't seen it ourselves. The spec on the screen tells you pretty much everything you need to know. The key feature, top left. Top left, Matt. That's top left. Top left it is. It's a 4K plus OLED, so 3840 by 2400, and with high image quality and color representation. Processor Core i9-13900H, as you can see. 1080 webcam in the top bezel. It's hidden, but it's there. And we've got up to RTX 4070 graphics. I'm also intrigued by this bit of spec at the bottom left. Up to 8 terabytes of SSD storage. I want to see that particular version because I think those SSDs are blooming hard to come by. Take it all together, this laptop looks really impressive to me. There are a couple of quirks, one being that you've got a micro SD card reader just under my finger. You get like a little dongle which will give you a full-size card reader and more USB, and there are ports around the back. But putting that to one side, I ask you, sir, how much would you pay for this laptop? The answer in the UK, £2,100, including VAT. And that strikes me as really impressive. Clearly, the graphics and processor are good, but it's all about the screen. However, next to the Aero 16 OLED, we have the Aero 14 OLED, the unloved cousin. This model, which looks perfectly okay, is not coming to the UK. And therefore, we're going to pass on by and just ignore it. Fun fact with Aero motherboards in strange lighting conditions, which here is basically sepia. These are silver in colour. Now we know that Aero should be white because that's how it should be. And we understand Gigabyte will be doing white motherboards, not necessarily with the Aero brand, but white motherboards are returning. Meanwhile, here we have somewhat budgety boards with large aluminium heat sinks, trying to disguise the fact that the VRMs are, quite frankly, mediocre. This Aero is all about the rear I/O panel, which has loads going on. Not so much on the board itself. Here's the funny thing with the Aorus GeForce RTX 4080 16GB master. This isn't a model that Kit Guru typically gets to review. So what we're looking at here, tell you what, Matt, swing around the end, have a look at it side on. Show us the thickness of this bad boy. And all the RGB bling. And an LCD screen on the top. This is the kind of graphics card that will give Dominic fun and games when it's review time. The Aorus 17X 2023 version. This is the big boy. It's a Core i9-13980HX vapor chamber cooler. We like them. Quad HD screen, 240Hz refresh, 4 cooling fans, up to 230 watts of TDP. As we know, it's the graphics that takes most of the cooling rather than the processor, and in this instance RTX 4090. Typically we expect the graphics to take 150 watts, however here it can boost to 175. Add in 50 or so watts for the processor, that adds up to loads. This is both a content creator and a gamer's laptop. We're going to check on pricing, but we understand it's to be 3,000 and something and well shy of 4,000. Motherboard time. On the left we have the Z790 Aorus Elite AX. We've seen it, it's perfectly okay. Moving on. The Z790 Aorus Tachyon, we haven't had it on review at Kit Guru. This is an overclocking demon. As you can see, looking at the power VRMs under those enormous heatsinks, it's a relatively stripped down board, but with a load of overclocking features. So very high-end hardware for the VRMs, a whole series of micro buttons at the side and other little dip switches and so on. Basically a specialist board with 2 DIMMs for DDR5, not for your average casual user. And then we move down, literally, the stack. Z790 Aorus Master X and Z790 Aorus Extreme X. These 2 boards have been prepared for later this year for the refresh of Raptor Lake. We're not yet certain whether this is going to be termed 14th gen or 13th and a half gen. So these are LGA 1700 DDR5 boards, but they've been juiced up. We have, for example, a simple lift-off heatsink that goes over the M.2 covers. And snaps back in place. A chunky main M.2 heatsink and the graphics release that we expect to see. An LCD panel on the VRM heatsink. Moving across to the Aorus Extreme X, we can see that on the VRM heatsink we have a programmable LCD display. We've also got Wi-Fi 7. And we have ports that will become USB 4 when Gigabyte has the hardware to actually control the USB 4. In other words, this board is in development. Also, just look at the enormous heatsink on the main M.2. Clearly this is designed for Gigabyte's Gen 5 SSD, which sheds a fair amount of heat. But that heatsink on an SSD is like nothing I've ever seen before. Two motherboards that might be 13.5 gen or 14th gen. They'll be coming out later this year, most likely September or October. And we're finishing up with what Gigabyte calls the cable stealth design. And the reason is, it's designed so the cables are stealthy. We're going to have to come up with a name for these types of motherboards, as we were saying at Thermaltake. But we think stealth does the job pretty blooming well. Let's just go to the back side of the case, or the right side. On this side, of course, we've got loads of clutter. But what the heck? Put a solid steel panel on? Doesn't matter, does it? Fun fact I've just learned. We were asked earlier today by somebody else whether or not these stealth motherboards with the rear cabling had been patented by Gigabyte, and we said surely not, because MSI and Asus are doing the same thing. We've learned subsequently that actually someone else entirely has patented these products in America, which means there's a bit of a kerfuffle going on. We're fine in Europe. You Americans who are watching this, maybe not so fine. This has been Kit Guru at Gigabyte at Computex 2023.